You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your Security Plus certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. The foundation of every security system is access control, which is the process of deciding who can do what. Its goals are simple but critical. Make sure that authorized people can use resources they are entitled to, stop unauthorized actions, and create an audit trail of what happened. In other words, access control ensures that the right people get in, the wrong people stay out, and that there is a record of every decision. Without it, organizations would have no way to manage who can read sensitive data, change system configurations, or execute transactions. It provides both protection and accountability, making it one of the most important building blocks of cybersecurity. Access control also ensures that security decisions are not made in an ad hoc way. Instead of relying on trust or informal arrangements, rules are applied consistently and automatically. This reduces human error and insider risk. For example, even a well-intentioned employee might access data they should not if the system does not restrict it. With proper access controls, the system itself prevents this action. Additionally, auditability means that if a breach or mistake does occur, investigators can trace who accessed what, when it happened, and whether it violated policy. These records are essential for compliance and incident response. The three goals: authorization, prevention, and audit work together to create a secure and orderly environment. Without them, systems would be chaotic. Imagine a library with no checkouts. Anyone could walk in, grab books, and walk out, and nobody would know what was taken. With access controls, the library knows who borrowed which book and when it is due back. Cybersecurity follows the same logic. Proper access control creates order out of potential chaos. One of the earliest and most straightforward models is Discretionary Access Control, or DAC. In this model, the resource owner decides who gets access and what kind of access they receive. If you have ever right-clicked a file on your computer and set its permissions so only certain users can read or write it, you have used DAC. The power lies with the owner to set or change permissions at their discretion. This makes DAC flexible and user-friendly, which is why it is common in many operating systems. The downside of DAC is that it relies heavily on the judgment of individual users, which can lead to mistakes or overly generous sharing. For example, an employee might accidentally grant broad access to a sensitive file simply because it seemed convenient at the time. Attackers can exploit these weak points to move laterally within a system once they compromise one user's account. DAC provides flexibility, but it can become difficult to control at scale in large organizations. Think of DAC like a house where the owner decides who gets a key. This works fine for a small group of friends, but in a large apartment building, it quickly becomes unmanageable. Without consistent rules, some people may end up with more keys than they should, and others may not have enough. DAC is effective for small-scale use, but does not always meet the demands of high-security or enterprise environments. Mandatory Access Control, or MAC, is very different. In MAC, access decisions are based on fixed policies set by administrators, not by resource owners. Information is labeled with classifications such as confidential or top secret, and users are assigned clearance levels. Access is only granted when the clearance matches the classification, regardless of what the file's creator wants. This model is common in government and military systems, where strict confidentiality is critical. The advantage of MAC is that it enforces consistent, centralized policies that cannot be bypassed by end users. This prevents mistakes and ensures that rules are applied evenly across the entire system. However, it can also be rigid and harder to manage for day-to-day business operations. Unlike DACs, users cannot casually share information even if they need to collaborate, because the system itself enforces the classification labels. You can think of MAC like airport security. No matter who you are, you cannot bypass the rules. Everyone goes through the same screening process, and clearance is required for certain restricted areas. The policies are enforced by the system, not by individual discretion. This makes Mac very secure but sometimes less flexible for organizations that need collaboration across different levels. Role-based access control, or RBAC, provides a middle ground. Instead of managing permissions for every individual, RBAC assigns permissions to roles, and users are then placed into those roles. For example, the role of HR manager might include access to employee records, while the role of finance analyst might include access to accounting systems. This simplifies administration because adding a new person is as easy as assigning them to the right role. RBAC is powerful because it reflects how organizations naturally divide responsibilities. People are hired into roles, and those roles carry certain duties. By mapping roles to permissions, RBAC scales well as organizations grow. It also reduces the chance of errors, since permissions are defined once per role rather than for every individual user. However, if too many roles are created, administrators can face gaze, where the system becomes just as complex as managing individuals. A good analogy for RBAC is a theater company. Actors, stage crew, and ticket sellers all have specific responsibilities. Instead of negotiating tasks individually, the director assigns duties based on roles. This keeps the production organized. In the same way, RBAC assigns permissions based on job functions, ensuring users get the access they need and no more. Attribute-based access control, or ABAC, takes this concept even further by using policies that consider attributes about the user, the resource, and the environment. An attribute could be a user's department, the type of device they are using, the time of day, or even their location. Rules are written to grant or deny access based on these attributes. For example, a policy might say, allow access to the finance system only if the user is in the finance department and the request comes from inside the company's network. The strength of ABAC is its flexibility and fine-grained control. Unlike RBAC, which is limited to predefined roles, ABAC can adapt to changing conditions. This makes it especially useful in cloud and mobile environments where context matters. However, managing attributes can be challenging. If too many attributes are used, or if they are not well defined, the system can become complex and hard to troubleshoot. Think of ABAC like a bouncer at a club who checks not just your ID, but also your dress code, whether you are on the guest list, and whether it is the right night for your type of ticket. All those factors are attributes, and together they determine whether you are allowed inside. This makes ABAC powerful, but also more complex to manage, compared to simpler models like DAC or RBAC. Role engineering is the process of designing and maintaining roles in a role-based access control system. The goal is to group duties logically so that each role makes sense in the context of an organization's structure. Best practices include keeping the number of roles manageable, using clear naming conventions, and minimizing privilege overlap. For example, instead of creating a separate role for every small task, administrators combine related tasks into one role. This prevents role explosion, where hundreds of overlapping roles become impossible to manage. When building roles, administrators often start by analyzing job functions. If two people in similar positions consistently need the same permissions, those tasks should probably belong in the same role. Naming conventions also matter because clear labels like payroll specialist or customer support agent reduce confusion compared to vague labels such as level 1 inch or miscellaneous access. Clarity improves both usability and auditability. Good role engineering requires balance. Too few roles may lead to overbroad permissions, while too many roles create unnecessary complexity. The most effective approach is to design a small, stable set of roles that reflect actual business duties. Over time, these roles can be refined as responsibilities shift, but the foundation should remain simple and well documented. Attribute taxonomies are equally important in attribute-based access control systems. A taxonomy is simply a structured way of categorizing attributes. Without organization, attribute lists can quickly grow into chaos. For example, department might be recorded as HR in one system, human resources in another, and 001 in a third. If these are not standardized, policies will fail. Attribute taxonomies bring order by defining consistent categories and naming rules. Managing attribute sources is also critical. Attributes may come from human resources systems, device management tools, or even real-time sensors that detect location or device posture. Each source must be trusted and synchronized. If HR data is out of date or a device report is inaccurate, the access decision could be wrong. Therefore, organizations must ensure that attribute sources are reliable and refreshed regularly. For learners, it helps to think of A, B, A, C attributes like ingredients in a recipe. If the ingredients are mislabeled or spoiled, the recipe fails. Taxonomies and trusted sources ensure the ingredients are correct and consistent, so the access control recipe works as intended. In an access control architecture, two important components are the policy decision point, or PDP, and the policy enforcement point, or PEP. The policy decision point is where the decision is made. Yes or no, allow or deny based on rules and inputs. The policy enforcement point is where the decision is applied, such as a firewall blocking traffic or an application rejecting a login. Together, PDP and PEP form the brain and the muscle of an access control system. The PDP and PEP model also improves auditability. By centralizing decision-making, organizations can log exactly why an access request was granted or denied. This improves transparency and helps when investigating incidents or demonstrating compliance to regulators. Before enforcing policies, it is wise to test them. Policy testing and simulation help organizations avoid accidental disruptions. For example, an overly strict policy could accidentally lock out an entire department. By simulating the impact of a policy change, administrators can see what would happen before it goes live. This reduces risk and builds confidence in the access control system. Testing can be as simple as running what-if scenarios or as advanced as using test harnesses that mimic real-world requests. Either way, the goal is to detect problems early. Without testing, organizations risk operational disruptions that frustrate users and erode trust in security systems. Security controls should protect, not hinder, the business. Policy testing makes that possible. Learners can think of policy testing like a dress rehearsal before opening night. Actors perform in costume under stage lights to catch mistakes before the audience arrives. Similarly, access control policies must be rehearsed through simulation to ensure they perform as expected when applied in production. Delegation is another important concept. Sometimes a user may need temporary or limited access outside their normal role. Delegation allows this without permanently changing their permissions. For example, an employee covering for a manager on vacation might be temporarily granted the manager's role. Delegation constraints ensure these temporary grants expire automatically and often require approval workflows. This prevents privilege creep, where temporary access becomes permanent because no one remembers to remove it. With constraints in place, access rights automatically return to normal once the task is complete. Delegation with time limits and oversight balances flexibility with control. It allows organizations to adapt to real-world needs without undermining long-term security. Dynamic attributes bring additional flexibility, especially in ABAC systems. Attributes such as time of day, device health, or real-time risk scores can be factored into access decisions. For example, a policy might allow access during business hours but deny it late at night. Or it might grant access only if the device has up-to-date antivirus protection. These dynamic attributes allow policies to adjust in real time, reflecting current conditions. The challenge is that dynamic attributes require reliable feeds and fast evaluation. If the risk score system fails, access decisions may be delayed or incorrect. Therefore, organizations must design for resilience, ensuring that dynamic attribute systems have backups and fallbacks. Proper monitoring is also essential to detect errors quickly. Lifecycle management ties all these concepts together. Roles and attributes must be created during onboarding. reviewed periodically through recertification, and removed during offboarding. Without lifecycle controls, access tends to accumulate over time, leaving users with more privileges than they need. This increases the risk of misuse, whether intentional or accidental. Integration with single sign-on and broader identity and access management systems is also essential. Centralizing enforcement ensures consistency and simplifies auditing. Instead of scattering access decisions across dozens of applications, SSO and IAM act as hubs, applying the same rules everywhere. This reduces both complexity and cost while strengthening security. Of course, not every system supports modern access models. Legacy applications may lack the ability to enforce RBAC or ABAC rules. In these cases, organizations must apply compensating controls. Examples include placing the legacy system behind an API gateway that enforces modern policies or restricting access through network segmentation. This way, even older systems remain part of a secure overall architecture. Measuring the health of an access control program is key to long-term success. Useful metrics include the number of orphaned privileges, meaning permissions left behind after a user leaves, the percentage of access covered by roles instead of ad hoc permissions, and the completion rate of periodic access attestations. These measurements show whether the program is improving or drifting out of control. Automation helps organizations manage access at scale. Policy as code is a technique where rules are written in machine-readable form and managed like software. Test harnesses can then automatically check new policies before they go live, just as code is tested before being deployed. This approach improves consistency, reduces human error, and allows rapid adaptation to new requirements. In the end, choosing and operating an access control model is about balance. Systems must be manageable for administrators, granular enough to reflect real-world needs, and auditable for compliance and accountability. Whether using DAC, MAC, RBAC, ABAC, or hybrids, the goal is the same. Enforce the principle of least privilege while still supporting the organization's mission. By combining strong design, clear governance, and practical measurement, access control models become powerful tools for both security and efficiency. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.